Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you to the leadership and the organizers of the Hellenic Association for Energy Economics for this sixth annual symposium. It's very impressive what you've organized in terms of how expansive it is and how comprehensive it is. We are near the conclusion. I'm the moderator, Max Pyziur. We are presenting a panel on the role of geopolitics and energy transition in Southeast Europe. What I'd like to do is begin with some slides just to set the motivate the discussion somewhat over the next hour. These are some very familiar stories. I hope to, since we're all basically a community of people who watch the energy markets and energy developments. In recent months, regional natural gas benchmarks have risen considerably in 2021, signaling concern ahead of winter. This is monthly data. Prices are considerably higher than this. A story that's been told over and over in the last few weeks: total European natural gas storage is significantly below trend. This is signaling considerable concern. If we look towards Asia, Brent crude and Australian coal versus the Japanese Korean marker LNG benchmark on an energy basis, some Japanese practitioners have already taken, in the middle of the summer, have taken this as a cue, seeing that LNG on an energy basis is more expensive than petroleum or Australian coal, have made adjustments to their energy mix going into the winter. Echoing this a little bit further, we look at thermal coal stocks at European harbors, and we see in 2021 that they are considerably below trend. So while we don't intend this to be yet another discussion on pipeline battles, natural gas, and those sorts of issues, this is the background in which that to some degree motivates our discussion. Looking at the panelists that we have, we were scheduled to have Nikolaos Bakatselos. Unfortunately, he won't be with us. Instead, we have three panelists: Olga, Khakova, Deputy Director for Flagship Convenings and Global Engagement at the Global Energy Center of the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C., Nicolò Sartori, a Senior Research at the Enel Foundation, and Theodoros Tsakiris, an Associate Professor of Geopolitics and Energy Policy at the University of Nicosia Business School. As I mentioned, my name is Max Pyziur. I'm a director at the Energy Policy Research Foundation in Washington. We go by EPRINC. I'd like to conclude with one last slide here. Some themes and comments to motivate the discussion. First, two considerations. Have the potential cost and performance risks of the energy transition been properly estimated? And with a focus on Southeast Europe, has supportive consensus for the energy transition been properly assessed? We know that there are some initiatives and partnerships: PTEC, the Partnership for Transatlantic Energy and Climate Cooperation, the 3Cs initiative in the eastern portion of Europe, and the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, known as CBAM, under active discussion across Europe. So it'd be interesting to see how these potentially impact or what sort of concern they are for the southeastern region of Europe. And lastly, resource developments. The Eastern Mediterranean offshore natural gas fields. I understand there's about 120 trillion cubic feet in reserves there, identified as reserves there, and then any potential renewable energy projects and what their impact potentially would be. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and I open it up to the panelists, Olga, Nicolò, Theodoros. Hopefully these will give you some motivation for discussion, and hopefully one of you could pick it up from here.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic start and a really great, helpful scene setter. I do want to start off expanding the conversation a little bit when we talk about geopolitics. I think we can't escape the pipeline politics that's still absolutely there, and especially with the recent pricing and other constraints that we are experiencing across the world. But I think when we speak about geopolitics, it is no longer just about natural gas. We are also discussing the geopolitics of clean energy supply chains and how to make sure that United States and Greece and other countries in the region, and also at the EU level, perhaps through the US-EU Trade and Technology Council, can truly partner on creating these robust supply chains to make sure that the clean energy developments are not constrained through those issues. I think energy efficiency and geopolitics are also often not seen tied together or seen as connected in any way. But I want to change that narrative. I think it's really important to emphasize how energy efficiency actually does relate to geopolitics in a way of, when you reduce energy waste in terms of how you utilize energy, how you produce energy, how it's deployed in our households or businesses, then you end up relying less on energy imports and you are more secure. And that is how it ties into the geopolitics issue. So I wanted to just start off with a bit of a scene setter in terms of expanding the conversation to, yes, let's talk about natural gas and its important role in the region, but also let's keep all of these other topics in mind as we talk about geopolitics of energy transition.
Thank you. Nicolò or Theodoros, please. Nicolò, if you could turn up your mic a little bit, please.
Am I still mute? Okay, I made it to the device, but it didn't work. If we go in alphabetical order, I would like to thank Olga for starting off with this, because my idea was exactly to discuss not only the geopolitics of energy or the geopolitics of energy transition in the region, but to try to go beyond and to also provide some thinking out of the box, a new perspective, and possibly talking about the geopolitics of non-energy transition in the area, which is very, very important, because inaction in terms of energy transition for the region, and when I talk about the region, of course I talk about Southeastern Europe, but you can consider also the Mediterranean basin, Middle East, the Levant on the one side, the North Africa on the other, and you can stand eastward also to the Caucasus to a certain extent, and Central Asia, which are quite environmentally weak in this sense. And when we talk about the inaction in terms of energy transition, of course, we talk about people well-being, we could talk about energy poverty, we talk about growing inequalities, and of course in Europe, recent studies tell us that, for instance, if we look at energy poverty, it's 80 million people that are not able to, that cannot afford to buy, to pay their bills to warm their houses in Europe as of today. And this is amplified in particular, and will be amplified in the next years and decades by two events. Today, by the pandemics, by the COVID, which has contributed to dropping incomes, domestic consumption growing and increasing due to the new lifestyles like smart working and remote activities, and on the other one also the bill that rose. So we have an increasing energy poverty dimension that is affecting Europe, but not only. And on the other side, of course, we have the climate change, which is the big elephant in the room with this role as a risk multiplier, with economic underdevelopment, social inequalities, and also resources constraint that is going to be amplified by climate change. And if today, as I was mentioned before, 80 million people with no capacity to pay their bills in Europe to warm their houses, in the future we probably have more and more people that will not be able to switch on the air conditioning or to accede to water resources because of this situation of energy poverty. This is something that for me is very important to discuss, to understand where the region is heading in this context, which can be also the cooperative frameworks that we can imagine in the area in order to get to of course move away from the fossil from the fossil economy, from a fossil-based energy sector in a smooth way, in a way that, of course, do not cause additional problems related, for instance, to energy poverty. But as we have seen also from the spike in electricity and power prices during these days, this is quite interconnected with, on the one hand, the geopolitical dimension, but in the other hand, in particular, with the role of natural gas in our energy mixes. Tackling these issues, trying to go beyond the traditional framework in which we are used to look at the geopolitics of energy, I think would be helpful, in particular in a region where the climate change is hitting massively, in a region where there is a 0.5 degrees more on average compared to the rest of the world when we look at the growing increased temperature in the area. So this is my first comment, and again, thanks, Olga, for giving me the opportunity to elaborate a bit on this. Thank you.
Perhaps Theodoros now, if you could offer
Yes.
your views on this particular topic, on the topics that we broached.
Well, I've lost you for a little while. Well, thank you, Mr. Max. Thank you to the organizers. Also, it's nice to meet again, even in that fashion, old colleagues such as Nicolò, that we've worked together for almost 3 years for joint projects. Yes, indeed. Even though most of the discussion about the energy security in the region and thereof the geopolitical implications of that in the Eastern Mediterranean have been monopolized by natural gas, I think that obviously we need to understand that the definition and the impact of the climate change on the definition and the content of energy security is going to change that in a very dramatic way. This is true, and in the short to medium term, at least until 2030, 2035, this is going to make us even more important. Even though in the longer term it might not be the case, in the short to medium term it will be the case. And the reason behind that is, as you very well know, the two primary strategic priorities of the greening of the global economy, or the decarbonization of the global economy, is to first decarbonize or delignitize for our region the electricity mix, and then expand the utilization of green electricity throughout different demand sectors across the new energy economy, including transportation, and a combination of that with CCS and CCUS for the areas which are very hard to abate in terms of greenhouse gas emission reductions in the industrial sector, where hydrogen and potentially the extension of life of the operation of new gas-fired plants equipped with CCUS may play a role, and are the only solution with the current technology constraints. In the region is characterized, in addition to that, by a very steep change in terms of climate conditions. We've lived through throughout most of Southern EU members over the last summer through extreme weather conditions, which were in many countries combined with mega fires, wildfires, which really drove the point that the climate conditions have shifted, have changed. And if you ask any major policymaker in Athens or Nicosia, or from this point of view, or even further to the south, this was not an isolated phenomenon. Within Greece, only in 2021, we had two extreme weather cases phenomenon, one of extreme cold in February and one of extreme heat, 10 days of extreme high temperatures, which tested our electricity security system to the limit. And this is not an excluded phenomenon. The frequency of that is going to increase. As we bring into the system more and more intermittent or variable renewable electricity, in the absence of strategic storage or grid scale battery options, and the limited impact that we can get from pumped hydro storage, which we have one plant in Greece that could be ready by 2027, 2028, until we develop credible and large-scale electricity storage solutions, the only way that we can balance the system and provide necessary flexibility and adequacy for an electricity system which would develop over the next 10, 20, 30 years as the core component of the energy security system as a whole, we need a base load factor electricity generation system which is going to be based on natural gas. So Greece is one of the most clear examples of that front-loaded delignitization of our electricity mix, which is based on a combination of renewables and natural gas as being expanded over the next 5 years. By 2025, we're going to stop using lignite, even though significant portions of that lignite, almost all of it, was domestically produced for obviously economic and environmental reasons. But we're shifting to renewables with the limitations of those renewables and to a significant expansion both of main load but also peak load demand gas-fired electricity. We have several plants in different phases of construction in gas, of new gas-fired electricity coming on stream, coming online over the next 2 to 3 years. And that is by itself an indication that gas is not only the critical, the most important bridge fuel to make renewables, to make the transition to a dominant mix of renewables in our electricity mix safe, secure, but also economically accessible, especially to these parts of the society which have significant problems. We're going to see, unfortunately, throughout Europe, as Nicolò just said, we're seeing an expansion of people having trouble meeting their electricity bills and their energy bills. And this is one aspect of the energy transition we need to be able to be very, very cognizant of in order to make sure that the transition does not backpedal and that it has the necessary social support to move forward with difficult decisions which are several times very, very unpopular, even when it comes, for example, to the installation of wind parks, okay, across the coast and in several areas in Greece and other countries, or even with utilization up to a certain above saturation point of solar power technologies or other solar technologies like CSP, which could contribute to a more steady and a more secure load over electricity system.
If I could intervene there, given what you've discussed, the importance of natural gas and the discussion that both Nicolò and the points that Nicolò and Olga have made, back to some of the items that I mentioned in my points for discussion. How viable are the findings in the Eastern Mediterranean, the natural gas? How soon can they be utilized in order to meet the consumption demands that you describe here? And what is the available of renewable energy projects? Location in terms of here in the United States, we always point to, or some people always point to, the Mojave Desert, the western regions as being exemplary for solar. Are there similar things, and they can be accessed and integrated into the southeastern portion of Europe? And then lastly, again, the three initiatives that I mentioned, PTEC, 3Cs, and carbon border adjustment mechanism. Do they have a role in bringing natural gas forward as a balancing fuel? Do they have a role in the intermittent energy projects once they're identified? So it's just anyone and everyone, please. I was just echoing back some of the things that you said, and hopefully spur this on forward.
So ladies first, or what if we go to reverse? It's fine.
It's fine. Thank you so much. No, thank you for bringing back up some of these initiatives. Let's start off with CBAM, because I know you mentioned that last. As we think about the role that natural gas will continue to play in the region, and I think all on this panel, I think we all agree that it will be a key role for decades to come. I think the key questions are how to decarbonize natural gas that's coming into the region, how to secure diverse supplies and make sure that these supplies continue to be diversified from multiple suppliers. You mentioned developments in the region and their visibility. I think the higher pricing could make that more attractive for some developers, but we also don't know how long this higher price constraints will last. But I think addressing the conflicts in the region would be really, really important in order to really, truly optimize the natural gas potential that the region has to offer. I think a lot of the deliveries could go through LNG, through Greece, and Greece can serve as a hub to the region, supplying the region robustly with the natural gas that's needed. I know that transport and utilizing natural gas in transportation in order to reduce greenhouse emissions was mentioned, and I think that's really important as well. Integrating new technologies, for example, like hydrogen, will be another solution to reducing emissions from natural gas. It will be interesting to see how the higher pricing might actually incentivize more of a green hydrogen production versus, blue or gray. And I think in terms of CBAM, I think right now, CBAM does not include natural gas exports, but of course, in the future, everyone is anticipating that could potentially be rolled out in the next several stages. There's a lot of opportunities for consultations and for doing this right in terms of making sure that how carbon intensity of natural gas and LNG are measured, to make sure that it's measured fairly, transparently. In that way, whatever is coming in, the exporters can feel really great about their product being judged and being evaluated properly versus being treated unfairly in any way, shape, or form, which in this case, that could actually be a threat to energy security in the region, and it could threaten the geopolitical relationships with the United States and other allies who are exporting to the region.
I go.
Please,
Yeah.
anyone.
Okay. No, we keep the same order. Okay.
Okay.
No, my guess is two questions raised. One is the one related to the infrastructure, to the need of balancing the intermittency of the renewables in the system that will be, of course, also expanding the load of electricity if we tend to electrify part of the consumption that are today satisfied by different vectors, like, for instance, natural gas for home consumption, and possibly also oil and oil products when it comes to transport. Of course, you need a number of investment, very, very important when it comes to the network. The networks become fundamental. Smart grids and batteries that were mentioned by Theodoros are becoming fundamental, and of course they have to be associated with expanding renewable energy capacity. And if we look at the overall cost of this investment, and if we look at how renewable energy sources are electricity generated are declining, and compared to the traditional fossil fuel, and if we look at the endowment, at the renewable endowment of the region, in the south in particular, the solar component, but if we look also in the northern part, also the wind one, we can see that probably there is room for expanding the utilization of renewables associated with smart and efficient grid, associated with increasing storage capacity, and of course with the management of the demand and the reduction of the demand through efficiency that was also mentioned in Olga's previous comment. This is something that is feasible. There are some tests that probably are, for instance, in Italy, there is discussion on the possibility to go completely electrified in Sardinia, which is a big island. It's not a huge population. It's just 1.6 million people in the region. But there are some pilots where we consider the potential expansion of renewables without at least adding new gas capacity. So replacing at least the lignite component or the coal component with additional renewables, coupled with new grids and new storage system. And as I was saying, the price component, the price declining in solar and wind are an important factor that make this solution potentially viable. And the other factor, and here's the question of, as it might be a bit provocative, if we continue to look at natural gas in a securitized way into a geopolitical way, and what's happening, the development of the resources in the East Med are part of this securitized approach towards gas. Probably this trends, this approach will be able to probably speed up this process, and this is reflected, of course, in the higher prices of natural gas, which has repeated by all of us, contributed to increase the price of electricity. But probably geopolitics of natural gas to a certain extent, and probably the Southeast European region, the East Med region, is a case in point. Can be probably the geopolitics of natural gas can be probably act as a driver and a push for a faster transition in this region, because political but also economic fundamentals are probably telling us that investing in a decarbonized system from now is probably becoming more effective and efficient than substituting lignite with other fossils.
Well, just to follow up on what Nicolò has said, in order to be able to do that in the absence of grid-scale batteries, you need to have another form of backup load to stabilize the system. Sardinia is obviously very well interconnected with the Italian mainline electricity system. So you can move loads of electricity stabilizers. You have also on the works the first central Mediterranean interconnector of electricity between Tunisia and Italy, if I'm not mistaken. So that increases the availability. That's not the case in the Eastern Mediterranean and Southeastern Europe, unfortunately. During we need more interconnectivity to be able to plan in the same with the same speed in that direction. With regards to the renewable electricity capacity of the region, looking to Southeastern Europe, obviously there is significant solar potential anywhere to the south of Athens, to put it mildly. Cyprus, Egypt, Israel, they have and of course all of Greece and Crete have very significant solar power potential. The additional value of that in terms of Egypt with the space that it has to do with potential application of concentrated solar power, as we're seeing in Morocco, we're seeing in parts of Spain. That is it's a more stable, a less variable form of renewable electricity because of the storage capability that it has for a few hours at least. And the other major issue, the other major challenge, apart from hydrogen uncertainties and potential explosion of demand after 2025, more likely after 2035, has to do with offshore wind. Offshore wind, because of the congestion that we have in specific regions and because of the fact that a lot of communities within several countries, including island communities, in many cases, are extremely opposed or skeptical, to put it diplomatically, to the development of large-scale wind power parks. So the idea, and that is a European strategy, is to try to resolve these problems by getting them into the sea, within the territorial waters of the states, and even within their respective exclusive economic zone areas, where the potential lies for a significant increase. That does not resolve the problems of variability, but that's another area of significant potential input on the part of renewables. Now, with regards to gas, the reality of the matter is that gas is already monetized in the Eastern Mediterranean. They have significant volumes of Israeli gas being exported in the region to Jordan, but primarily to Egypt. Some of that gas is already being liquefied in Egypt and is exported to areas in Southeast Mediterranean, including Greece. This is not something new. Greece is already a hub for the transit of gas from the Caspian Sea to Europe, as well as from LNG from the Eastern Mediterranean to the north. In addition to that, Greece is the epicenter of supporting and applying and facilitating diversification of gas sources of import and routes for the entire region of Southeastern Europe, from Hungary potentially to Ukraine, but certainly to its own direct neighborhood in North Macedonia, and through North Macedonia to Kosovo, and of course Bulgaria. I'm referring not only to the full commercial operation of the Trans-Adriatic pipeline since December 2020, which significantly limited both our dependence as well as Bulgaria's dependence on Russian gas imports, which in the case of Bulgaria were almost 90% of demand. In Greece today is below 40%. the expansion of utilization in our gasification facility, which now LNG accounts for about 50% of demand in Greece, whereas before 2019 it was less than 20, but it was about 20%. Half of our LNG is coming from the United States simply because it makes market sense. The price is competitive, so they are coming into the country, and we are developing products and thoughts and synergies which could utilize the existing natural gas transmission network and its vertical axis extensions to the north via IGB, via the interconnected between Greece and North Macedonia, via maybe potential future pipelines to bring more gas, including more pipe gas, into the Balkans. The delignitization process of the electricity mix, which is happening in Greece, is being repeated at the same pace, and in some cases at an even more accelerated pace in the Balkans, in Southeast Europe. These countries, contrary to Greece, have another option of in terms of their electricity security plan, and it has to do with nuclear power plants. Greece doesn't have nuclear power plants, but Slovenia is building one. Bulgaria has a new one. Poland is in the way of building one. Hungary has one. Romania and Bulgaria have nuclear power plant capacity. So if they do not phase them out, and I don't think it's in the 10-year plan to actually do so, they were going to keep that load. They have to delignitize, so gas demand is going to expand. We have gas diversification in the region. What we do not have in terms of sources, but what we do not have is diversification in terms of import routes. All the pipeline gas which goes into the southeastern Europe crosses through Turkey. We've succeeded, in parentheses, to get all of our gas dependent on the Turkish transit, exactly the same way that Eastern Europe was dependent on a single transit via Ukraine about 20 or 30 years ago. We need to be able to diversify away from that. One way of doing that is through building new LNG facilities that would limit our dependence on pipelines, which we're doing in Greece through the FSRU station in Alexandroupolis, which will open up a second gate for LNG exports primarily to Southeastern, to the Balkans and the West Balkans and the entire Southeastern European region, with the exception, of course, that this is a relatively small capacity infrastructure of about 5.2 BCM, of which, if you look at the average utilization rates of LNGs, gasification LNGs in Europe, would get a 50, 60, 65, best case 70% utilization rate over the next 20, 30 years. I'm not saying that this would be the case, just saying what's the average, about 50% utilization rate of regas facilities in Southeastern Europe, generally, in Southern and Southeastern Europe, in the EU generally. So in order to be able to complete that picture in terms of security of supply and security of transit, which is very important, you need a pipeline. And you don't need another Turk stream. You don't need additional volumes through pipelines that serve the purpose of diversification of supply but get you the same transit dependence. You need an EastMed gas pipeline going into Southeastern Europe that would offer simultaneously diversification of supply, diversification of demand, and opening up new routes, both for Cypriot and Israeli gas and even Egyptian gas, in a new form of a synergy throughout the Southeastern Mediterranean that would bring gas, pipe gas, also to Europe via Greece.
And you could act as a hub then too.
We are already a hub. We are going to be more of a hub as well.
With multiple routes, you could act as a hub. But sure. Your comments are fascinating. But to bring in a government component here, I
Hello? I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You might be having some connection issues.
Hello?
It's frozen.
Mm-hmm.
The two are connected.
Yes, I think we can
hear
continue.
You now.
Oh, he can't. Okay.
Hello?
Go ahead.
What was the question? Sorry, because I lost the connection.
Max, can you hear us?
Can you repeat the question? So I only heard I want to bring a government perspective, and that was when I lost the connection.
Yeah, all of us. We are in the same. Yeah, now it's disconnected.
Okay. Did you hear the question, perhaps?
No, no,
No,
just the
not
government
either?
perspective. No.
Well,
Okay, so
since we have a little bit of time, Nicolò, is there anything else that you wanted to add to the conversation? I know that he started with several feedback, but we'll get his government question once he comes back. But in terms of general topics that we've been discussing or responses to what's been said.
No. I know and I appreciate the Theodoros analysis of the gas situation, and I think that his analysis from a let's say traditional point of view perspective is completely right. And if we look at the gas as the solution for the energy system of the region, of course, the diversification of the supplies in terms of the routes and the supplies is certainly something very important in order to avoid over dependence from countries and in terms of both supplies and transit. The question is how reliable is this plan if we are looking at a full decarbonization by a serious decarbonization of our energy mixes by 2030 and full decarbonization by 2050. Is this something that makes environmental sense? The reply is certainly no. Is this something that makes a business sense if we look at the length of the investments in terms of lifetime and what we do really need to achieve the decarbonization results we are looking and we are aiming at? I don't want that a security of supply perspective, which is probably short to mid-term risk to overcome, are much more important in my view and in the views of many other actors that are investing, like investment funds, like insurance companies, that this long-term perspective is somehow overcome by a short term, and we really risk not being able to cope anymore with the greatest challenge for the region as well as, of course, for the rest of the planet, which is the climate and the cost of inaction in non-energy transition.
That's actually true, but if I may, Nicolò, the energy transition has different stages in different countries. Greece is in a much more privileged position because of our own renewable capacity. But once you cross the border, really the Balkans don't have another major option other than gas, unless they want to remain dependent on nuclear. These are the two basic load factors for most of these countries, not all of these countries, but most of these countries. Now, we need to be absolutely sure that you can transit from lignite to renewables without having to go through gas or a basic load factor. If you don't use gas, you may need nuclear. And I'm not saying new nuclear capacity being built in the region. And you need far higher levels of interconnectivity that we're not also seeing in the region of Southeastern Europe. We're not in Northwestern Europe or between Italy and Germany, where you have when you can secure very large parts of electricity demand through interconnectors. The region is not very well interconnected, either between itself or within the core system, and that creates a chasm that incentivizes a lot of these governments to the north of our border with regards to taking it in a more conventional, as you said, conventional way of thinking.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. Sorry, Max. And the question maybe brings us back to the question of government and governmental perspective. Here is there where we do need something that puts the policy at the core of the action.
Are government initiatives interfering, or are they helping, or what sort of government initiatives would be material to all these considerations that you've raised over the last 40 minutes? That's essentially where my computer failed. But those are the things the points that I feel still need to be perhaps addressed.
You mean the U.S. government role in the region? Sorry, it's not clear. Or generally government intervention?
Well, I mentioned 3 different government initiatives: PTEC, 3Cs initiative, and CBAM. But you can discuss those, or maybe there's some other ones that I myself am not aware of. It's because you've offered an awful lot of perspective on operational considerations, where the location of resources are, where consuming centers are, also where you have, say, high quality solar, high quality wind, operational considerations for wind in the context of certain Mediterranean states. But where does government come in? And I've identified 3 government initiatives. Perhaps there's more. Perhaps they shouldn't even be there. So that's the question or issue that I'm raising here. Should we flip a coin? Olga, if you want to go ahead, if we can continue in this way.
Well, I want to. I don't want to always go first. Why don't Nicolò or Theodoros, one of you go first, and then I can follow up because I have several points that I want to make on this area as well.
Okay, Nicolò, would you like to, or should I? Well, anyway.
On the policy options, you mean? On the.
Yeah, on what I just discussed. I mean, Theodoros, you focus on operational considerations and geographical considerations, but the role of governments and
strategic considerations as well.
Right.
Well, with regards the European context, the role of governments is very important within the Union framework. There is, as you very well know, the Resilience and Reconstruction Fund, which is a major boost to all European economies. Greece is particularly favored in this regard. We're expecting a very large portion of that, almost 20 billion form of grants to be a very large portion of that to be allocated on the energy transition projects, including infrastructure investment, including hydrogen investment, including investments in storage of electricity options, like almost half a billion are going to be offered as grants in order to develop grid-scale battery options over the next 10 years in Greece, because exactly we recognize the security component of intermittency. The PCI renegotiation of projects of common interest renegotiation is also very important in terms of infrastructure development for gas and electricity and hydrogen as well throughout the region, which is a very important discussion in and of itself. And of course, from a diplomatic point of view, the role of the US government, primarily on a bilateral level between US and Greece, has been helpful in terms of facilitating the implementation and simplifying the implementation of 2 very important projects in the region, apart from TAP. Primarily, I'm referring to the IGB pipeline, which should be operational by mid-2022, and the FSRU, Alexandroupolis FSRU, which is the new regasification facility in northwestern Greece. Greece is a participant to the PTEC. I was recently in the last ministerial PTEC in Warsaw last week, and it was very clear that Greece wants to be part of a more structured cooperation with this framework. And within this framework, particularly within the PTEC framework, I think that aspects that relate not only to energy security and energy storage technologies, but particularly when it comes to infrastructure protection and cybersecurity considerations of the energy system and the energy system infrastructure, I think that the US experience is something that needs certainly to be utilized and to be helpful to the countries that participate in the PTEC initiative. We have a lot to learn from the US experience in terms of infrastructure protection, both against kinetic threats as well as physical threats, as well as the cybersecurity component, which are both becoming more and more important as a result of the impact of the climate change on energy security.
Nicolò, if you could offer some thoughts.
Yes, of course. No, certainly. If we look at the European component, the European Union component, what has been described by Theodoros is fundamental. There is a push, there is a boost, financial wise, that can contribute to make these transformations possible, can contribute to reduce also the geographical and geopolitical implications of this transition. He mentioned interconnections. Of course, there are mandatory interconnection targets for the electricity sector in the European Union. Unfortunately, these are not fully met. These represent a fundamental problem, and these represent a fundamental problem in particular if you look at the Southeast region as a whole, including EU and non-EU member. Because if you consider that it's difficult to create interconnection, to decouple the electricity system between European countries, European founding countries, somehow you can understand how can it become complex and difficult if you try to connect the electricity sector of an EU and non-EU members. But I think that in this perspective, the cooperation, the cooperation as important venues of success. If we look at the expansion of not only the top-down cooperation, which represent a top-down strategic boost, which represent the drivers also in terms of financial commitments, but we increasingly see also bottom-up initiatives among regulators, among TSOs and also DSOs in Europe that can provide, let's say, a more stable and cooperative framework in order to allow that really the European electricity market is developed. We are waiting for the full development of this market. We have been developing for a full market for a while. This is something fundamental because without real interconnection, it will be difficult, of course, to also to offset the different nature of the different energy mix of the different countries. And I repeat, when we look at the Southeast European region, this situation is maximized because, of course, there is the energy community. Of course, there are parallel initiatives that can help in bringing EU and non-EU members together in this transition. But of course, when you look at the infrastructure development, we need a boost. Of course, the recovery plans from the European perspective represent a great opportunity. It has not to be missed, but here it comes to national application, national governance, which mix with the European one, and of course complicate things. But I think that what we really should emphasize when we look at this transformation is not only the challenges we face while looking at the electrification, at the energy transition, and the transformation of the system, but also the opportunity, the benefit, of course, in terms of socio economic, environmental benefits, but also the potential expansion in terms of industrial development, potential investment in GDP creation. We made some studies at the Enel Foundation, looking at for instance, looking at the electrification and the achievement of the Fit for 55 targets in terms of energy transformation. We will see that we will have a multiplicator of GDP creation, which could reach like 8,000 billion at the European level, not only in the energy sector, but in the overall economic, industrial, and social sector. So these numbers are important. I think that to a certain extent, of course, the governmental drive is fundamental, but also sometimes the rhetoric has to be more positive when we look at the transition. Not only highlighting, of course, with data and studies supporting this analysis, not only highlighting let's say the challenges towards this transition, which are there and which are fundamental to be overcome, but also the great opportunities. And I repeat, not only from an environmental perspective, but from a social inequality and also economic industrial perspective.
Thank you. I'm not sure where we stand on time. We started 20 minutes after the hour. It's so we might have either 6 minutes left or we might have a little more. But please, Olga, you said you had comments here.
Yes, absolutely. And I really like the optimistic note of looking at opportunities of the energy transition, because I think it's easy to forget. Yes, absolutely. Government entities, bilateral, multilateral partnerships have a really important role to play. But I think it's also important to understand where the gaps are in terms of what these initiatives can do. So, for example, EU has invested tremendous amount of money to date in terms of the pipeline infrastructure, LNG infrastructure, but I don't think, with the exclusion of the current projects that are in process of being finalized, I don't think we will see too much EU level funding for future LNG or pipeline. So I think pipeline investments. So I think that's an area where the international community, United States, has really, has to pay attention to and figure out how those kinds of projects can be supported, and especially the private sector finding opportunities to invest there. Initiatives such as the 3 Cs. I know that Greece is officially not a member, and I do think there's some opportunities with the Balkan countries and Greece, Ukraine, and other countries in the region joining the 3 Cs. I think that could be beneficial for all parties. But of course, that is a decision that's up to the 3 Cs countries. That's something for them to discuss and finalize. US-EU Energy Council, I mentioned US-EU Trade and Technology Council as a good platform to discuss, especially rare earth minerals and any kind of materials that are essential for clean energy transition. PTEC, we just came back from Poland a couple of days ago. I've a trip in the region, and Atlantic Council was really fortunate to partner with the DOE in terms of organizing PTEC this year. As we've noticed, there's an extra C in PTEC this time around, and it showcases this administration's commitment to climate being part of this initiative. I think that could be a really fantastic platform to exchange best practices in terms of electricity market functionality integration. There are working groups that are already been re-energized during the ministerial that happened last week. So I think we'll see a lot of really good work happening there. I think in terms of U.S. funding agencies, and DFC comes to mind, but of course they're limited to lower income and middle income countries. But there are some potential exemptions when it comes to projects that are essential to energy security. So I think that's an area that's really worth a conversation between the different countries in the region and the DFC to see what's really possible for upper middle income or high income countries in the region, to see if there's some of these exceptions that could apply for DFC funding. I think it's a missed opportunity that nuclear on the EU side has not been officially included as part of the ESG types of projects. I think that's an area where we're missing an opportunity to have a lot of government involvement on the EU level. But once again, that also opens up opportunities for US and the private sector to figure out how to support some of these projects that are already happening. And some of these partnerships are already happening. For example, Poland, Slovenia, and all of these were mentioned as developing projects. So I think I like the ending on the optimistic note. I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think securing our energy systems in geopolitics will look very different in the next upcoming decades, but some old issues will prevail. And I think working together and engaging both in private, public levels could really ensure that our cooperation is strengthened and our relationship is strengthened with the region.
We're very close to the quarter 15-minute mark. I'm not sure. I haven't gotten any instructions as to whether or not we end there or we continue, since we started 5 minutes late. For me, this has been very interesting, because this isn't a region where I'm particularly focused. The East Med, Southeastern Europe, and listening to your comments about the different initiatives, the events that are taking place, operational aspects. for me, it's someone who's in this field, in this particular community. It's very stimulating. I'm seeing notes here. Anyway, thank you to Nicolò, thank you to Olga, and thank you also to Theodoros for a very lively discussion. I apologize for my computer mishap, and hopefully we'll have the opportunity next time to do this in real space rather than virtually. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.